Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast version, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found at miamighostchronicles.com. You can also find information about my talk show appearances and any new book projects at marlenepardo.com, or go to Amazon and look up my author profile as Marlene Pardo Pellicer. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and also listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, and of course Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests as we talk about the mysteries of the unexplained. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy theories, and just about anything that is plain weird, you can visit Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing well, kind of. I was talking to the guest that we're going to have on, and even though, there's a little bit delayed in the release of the show, we here in South Florida, they just gave out a notice that there's the Hurricane Isaias is going out there. I'm telling you, never a dull moment, off the coast of Florida. And of course, it's still tracking this way. They don't know if it's actually going to skim off the east coast of Florida and then curve up maybe into the Carolinas, or if it's actually going to make any type of landfall. It looks like it might come in, if it does, maybe it's a Category 1. But, I've endured Category 4s, and a Category 1 is bad enough. But let me tell you something, especially with gusts of winds, especially like me that, you have animals and stuff like that. It's, okay, already, I'm thinking where are we going to put the animals, the cages, everything. Everybody laughs because they always ask me, Marlene, what do you do with the chickens? Believe it or not, since my house is elevated, I have lattice underneath on the outside, on the skirting of the house, so nothing goes in there. But I open it up and they all run under the house. That's exactly what my chickens do. They go under the house where they will not get plucked and end up in my neighbor's yard or maybe a mile down the road. And I've got a fallback plan for my free range chickens because I don't have anything really to keep them safe in that many of them. If we start getting that much wind. But yeah, I was saying, sometimes I'm so caught up with everything that today I went shopping and I noticed the water, all the water bottles. It was like, I walked up and the shelves are empty. And it's like, okay, Marlene, you're not paying attention to the weather. Sure enough, I went by the canned foods that was like everything, like, when you find like one little can over here and over there. I was like, yeah, sure enough, I hadn't paid attention to the weather reports for 2 days. The next thing you know is we've got, as a matter of fact, they issued the warnings like maybe a couple of hours ago. But yeah, that's what my weekend looks like it's going to be like. Luckily, I don't flood where I'm at, but you got to make sure. I've had experience. You got to make sure that certain things that you have, especially because we have that wraparound porch, that either you bring them down or you strap them down. Because if not, they will go flying. They become projectiles. So I was saying never a dull moment. But anyway, let's get to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest today. And this person is, and I know you guys ask about this all the time, is an expert in Bigfoot. And his name is W.J. Sheehan. And you've heard him on Coast to Coast AM and the Sasquatch Chronicles. He's an author of Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters books, and he brings you a podcast meant to chill the spine and stir your curiosity. Yes, we love that, don't we? and he teams up with his brother for some fantastic cryptid chemistry. Quote, these guys are like Click and Clack, the brothers on the NPR show Car Talk, meet Bigfoot. They're very entertaining, informative, and funny. So I don't know if I have Click or Clack. I'm happy to have one of them here. And he's going to talk to us about stories. And but help me to welcome him. How are you doing today, Bill?
Marlene, I'm doing fantastic. And stay safe down there, whether it be with the COVID or the hurricane.
I know, it was like, I'm telling you. That's why I was saying, he's like, well, okay, well, that's like one of those, hey, do you remember 2020? It's like, oh, please, I don't want to remember 2020, at least the way it's going to.
Yeah, 2020 is going to be one for the record book.
Oh, it's like, we're only halfway through this. But yeah, it's one of those, like, never a dull moment.
Right.
Some years are very boring, as in they just float on by. But this one's does not been that so far. But let me ask you something, Bill. How did you get interested in this field of the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch?
Well, first of all, who doesn't like a good creepy story?
Oh, of course.
And monsters, mayhem, ghosts, schools. UFOs, I mean, it's all grist for the mill. And I've had a lot of experiences. I told you, I think, when we first spoke, I've had angelic encounters. I've had numerous UFO encounters. I've never sighted a Bigfoot. However, I had an interest in this creature, this monster. And one thing led to another, and I believe everything happens for a reason, because I had written a couple of books, non-Bigfoot related, and I work in a huge hospital, and we had a new nurse come to the unit, and he and I developed a little bit of a friendship, a work friendship, and one thing led to another in our conversations. He knew I was a writer, and I was expressing to him my desire to change the covers on a couple of my books. You work with what you have until something better comes along. Sure. And so one thing led to another, and his wife had expertise in all kinds of things, including graphic arts, many years under her belt. And one night I found myself at their dining table discussing my desire to change the cover art. And I said to her, I'm wanting to start a book on Bigfoot. You think you could help me out with that? And she said, yeah. And so one thing led to another. And now I have, 8 books on Amazon, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I'm in my 60s, Marlene. These two young whippersnappers are telling me, eventually you're going to want to do a podcast, and you're going to have to do this. You're going to want to do audio books. And I was like, hey, listen, man, I write, really, I have no knowledge of what they're talking about or how to get anything done. Right. But lo and behold, the doors opened, and of course now I have 6 of the books on Audible, and I just finished a series of 3 books called The Exorcist.
Okay.
One is called The Exorcist: Truth and Lies. The other one I named Diabolica, and the last of the 3 is called Full Moon. So I've got all of these irons in the fire, and always podcasting, always interviewing, and you cannot believe the amount of accounts that are coming through to me via both the book or the books and the podcast. The people I talk to are incredible and extremely credible, I may add.
Yes.
So, I put on the inside the cover of my book, when I wrote the first one, if you've seen something, say something. Mm-hmm. And I was inviting people to come in and tell me their accounts that I hadn't spoken to before. And now, of course, with the podcast and having a link, BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com, they could just contact me there. And I regularly get, emails from people. And then, of course, I ask them to call me if they have something to say, or if I want to hear more about what it is they encountered or saw. And so there's this vast I actually have like a network of international detectives working for me now. And they're my audience. They're my audience.
Sure, because you know what? People, it's almost like people want to relate to somebody they think is not going to make fun of me.
That's right. Marlene, I was talking to a fellow the other night about a Bigfoot encounter he had 40 years ago.
Yes.
And extremely credible individual. We spent about an hour and a half on the telephone talking about everything under the sun. I get an education from the people I talk to because many of them, like myself, they don't do what I do, and I don't do what they do.
Right.
And so there's this sharing, this camaraderie. And it's funny because you talk about 2020 going down in the record books.
Mm-hmm.
But, years ago, and even way before my time, before the internet, before everything else that people think has been around for 1,000 years now, people remembered time frames by major events.
Yes.
Like the hurricane of 1930, the earthquake in 24, when my father died in 55.
Yes.
There was a year attached to an event, and to them it was a marker for what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that rocking chair on the porch conversation with a cup of sweet tea in your hand, people would chit-chat and kick around what happened to them and what the story was. And that story would continue through the years, and in some cases it was a Bigfoot account or the landing of a UFO,
Yes.
or some type of angelic visitation when Aunt Marge died.
Right.
There's all these stories, but they were all wrapped around a history that is passed down. We seem to have lost that today.
Right, and it wasn't meant to be shared. It wasn't because you were going to put it out. It was like just amongst the family of friends. And I tell everybody, I remember when I was growing up, usually after dinner, when it cooled down, we would sit outside and, we had like a shade tree and, then there was a night jasmine bush so you could smell it. And my family would sit out there and basically they would talk about, hey, things that were just talk exactly like what you described, and the conversation could drift to different things or things that came up, or did you hear about so and so and this happened, and things like that. And I want to say in some cases life was a lot slower where people actually did that.
Right.
But yes, I absolutely know what you mean as far as sharing that oral tradition. Not because you thought it's just because, or a conversation would come up and then there was, hey, do you remember when that person said that they saw, or when that happened, or blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, if you're a kid, you're here listening to all of this, and then you're the next ones that pass on the story.
Yeah, now, and another thing that I do, Marlene, and I bet $1 to a donut, you probably do the same. I'm the type of person where I don't hide too much from people. In other words, I will meet you, and at somewhere during our conversation, I'll tell you, I'm an author. I do a podcast on Bigfoot. I want to hit you right in the nose and try to open up or stimulate you to possibly share with me something you've experienced. Right. And I cannot tell you how many times I have done that, and somebody shared with me, well, you know, Bill, no, I don't know, do tell.
Yes.
And that just happened with me at the hospital the other night. There's a new security guard there. They're always kind of like rolling around. When I say the hospital, Marlene, this is a gigantic facility, 4,500 employees.
Wow.
Huge square footage of buildings and a college campus. So there was the security guard, and later at night, the hallway was pretty much empty. He was sitting at a security post, and I had seen him. I seen him around, say, hey, how are you, walking in and out. Well, this night I stopped to talk to him. I had 5 minutes, and I did what I just told you. How you doing, he says to me. I says, I'm okay, what do you do? We're talking. I says, well, I have a podcast on Bigfoot, and I do some writing, and I work here, and, oh, you believe in Bigfoot? I said, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. He says, hold on a minute, I want to show you something. So here we go. So the security guard pulls out his iPhone, turns it towards me and says, check this out. That's my brother's hand, and that's a Bigfoot track. His brother was hunting on the Appalachian Trail in western Pennsylvania and came across a beautiful Bigfoot track, and he took a picture of it with his hand laying next to it. He was taking the picture of his own hand for size comparison.
Right.
But I asked him if he would send it to me so I could post it on my website. A couple of days went by. I didn't get anything. I ran into him again. I said, hey, what about the picture? He said, my brother doesn't want it on the internet. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. His face isn't there. His name isn't there. I know. He just doesn't want it there. Wow. But this is kind of odd stuff that goes on. I played my cards. He spoke to me, which is something that happens. And I was like, wow, here we go again. But I couldn't retrieve what he had shown me because his brother didn't want to put it up. Now, why? Who the heck knows?
Right. Yeah.
But people are funny critters, man.
Yes. And you'd be surprised. I'm sure you've heard stories from people that they've never told anybody. It's just because you're a sympathetic ear. But sometimes they keep these stories and they never tell anybody. And when I mean nobody, family, wives, whatever, they don't tell anybody because they're afraid they're going to be looked at like the funny guy.
Yeah, well, I was on the phone with this guy the other night, as I told you, for about an hour and a half. His sighting, his encounter was 40 years ago. Okay. And during that lengthy conversation, he had told me that there was a number of times when he shared the story with certain individuals, and they jerked him around about it, But he had told a few people, and really to a person, everybody, thought he was full of you-know-what. And he said to me, you know what? I figured I'd call you. You sound like a regular guy, you and your brother, and I've read some of your books. And I said, you know what? I'm going to call him. I'm going to tell him about it. And then I asked him to call me because, you could tell me about something in an email, but I want to speak to you. I want to interview you. I want to know everything.
Right.
And because the details, Marlene, the details.
Yes, of course.
Everybody, when you get into the details like a good detective, you start to uncover similarities and a crumb trail that is very similar to the crumb trail that Bill told me or Marlene told me. And it's in this like interrogation that the evidence unfolds, and you realize, like, wow, the same thing is being seen here as over there, or that's very similar to what so-and-so told me. And none of these people know each other, by the way.
Right, yes, exactly. Isn't that fascinating? Or that you can offer them and you tell them, well, guess what? I have somebody else that told me something similar. And you can almost see, like, they sigh, like, really? Like,
yeah.
That's
it's
great.
Like a relief. It's like a relief to them.
Yes.
because there's a comfort zone in speaking to certain people. Somebody who's like-minded. Somebody who plays guitar well likes to have a conversation with somebody who also embraces playing the guitar.
Yes.
If you're having a glass of wine and you're sitting around, you don't really know anybody, and all of a sudden I say, well, I play a little guitar. Oh, really? Now, the evening has become a little better for that individual because they don't know anybody in the room,
Yes.
And
exactly.
the Bigfoot, the paranormal is the same way. I mean, you can't believe the ridicule that I take opening my mouth about the subject matter that I speak about, which we'll be speaking about tonight. We are speaking about it.
Yeah, yes.
But I don't let it bother me because I'm a big SOB, and if somebody wants to really take it up with me, they're not going to do it.
Right.
See, you could poke a little fun, you could ridicule and this and that, but I stand my ground. I don't back down for any of them. And, you could laugh, you could cajole, you could chuckle. But when I tell you something, I mean it. And that's that, so
Right.
that's that's... Go ahead.
No, what I'm saying is that, and you know what? And also there's some people that in front of other people, they'll like, oh yeah, but then off the record, they will actually admit to their own experiences, but they don't want anybody else to know about it.
Right, and you're right. On the side, when it's one-on-one, mano a mano,
Yes.
The story changes.
Uh-huh.
Actually,
Yeah.
no, I don't know. Tell me. And that is exactly why I bring the subject matter up. Because, look, this is a part of my life. I'm not, you don't write 8 books on Bigfoot and 3 books on The Exorcist if you don't think there's something to this.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could. I could be like one of these thriller writers that the next Navy SEAL episode or something, and the entire thing is fabricated. But I'm not. So,
well, there's a lot of people. I used to belong to MUFON, and I used to go to some meetings out here, and we would have people that belong to, especially like law enforcement or the military, and they would have experiences, and they said, you know what, we keep quiet about this. This could be a career killer, and they just keep it because they said even though it's not supposed to affect your potential, let's say for promotions, you don't want to be that guy. So
right.
A lot of them kind of have to wait till they're retired or they're not there anymore before they actually open up and talk about some of their experiences, whatever it might have been. But they never want to be labeled somehow like that. That's going to follow you around.
Well, you look at look at all the pilots that don't want to talk about the UFO encounter because they're afraid they're going to lose their ability to fly the plane.
Sure.
So
I don't blame them.
Yeah, well, look, if you're knocking down $250,000 a year and you've been doing it for 10 years, I don't think you want to lose that tomorrow,
Well, this is the thing. And this is the what people say, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Yeah, your boss should not do that, but that doesn't mean anything. It's what they actually end up doing that sometimes is, and I've heard of that a lot of guys, it's like, you know what? Yeah. Or they'll have a boss or a friend say, "Man, shut up! Don't talk about that anymore." Mm-hmm. Or and it kind of follows you around. Years will have passed, and it kind of attaches that you were the guy that happened to, or that you said you had an experience. So I know a lot of people, depending on what it is, just say, "Look, forget it. I'm never going to talk to anybody about this because I need to earn a living."
On our podcast. We kick around a lot of data. We investigate a lot of stories. We look at a lot of pictures. I read a lot of accounts. And then my brother and I kick it around. Right. What do you make of this? What do you think of these pictures? And look, it's a subjective thing. Am I right? But I'll tell you this, to harken back to something we were just mentioning 5 minutes ago. When you start to see the same things developing from Saskatchewan, Alberta, to Oregon, and then in Louisiana and Vermont, there's got to be some type of connection there, because you're talking like the four corners of North America, and people from all walks of life having similar experiences. Their descriptions, the things they say they hear, what they feel.
Yes.
How they feel mentally and physically. I don't even want to use the word coincidental, but it rings true to me that this type of event, it has to be credible, and I'm not the kind of person where I'm going to knock everybody down as being a BS artist that talks to me, right. Because to me they have no axe to grind. I'm not paying them, and unless everybody and their brother is trying to trip up W.J. Sheehan for kicks, which I don't think they are,
right.
Why would you even mention it?
Exactly.
And the fact is, when I'm talking to these people, as I said earlier, they know things. For instance, when I was dealing with a guy in Idaho, probably 6 months ago now. I can't even keep track of the time. This guy was with the Conservation Department. He was with the Sheriff's Department. And when he was a young man, he was a tracker. Not a tracker. He was a, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, he used to take pack parties or pack trips into the Rockies on horseback.
Okay.
3, 5, and 7 day trips on horseback. And look, I'm never going to do that. This guy was an encyclopedia of the outdoors regionally and the animals, what they do, what they don't do, things that have occurred. You and I will never know the information that this guy had unless he was to share it with you. Right. So why would he be involved in all of this and know all of this and then suddenly throw at me some jive about a Bigfoot coming into their camp?
Right, exactly.
It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
I don't know if you've ever... I talk about this all the time, and I was talking about it tonight because I was sharing a story that was incredible that one of my listeners pointed out to me. But it reminded me of Teddy Roosevelt's book, The Wilderness Hunter. And Teddy Roosevelt, of course, everybody knows who he is. And he had the Bauman Encounter in his book, The Wilderness Hunter. Now, the Bauman Encounter is about, was told to him by a trapper he knew. And the Wilderness Hunter is cover to cover factual data about hunting trips, what they ate, where they stayed, based on where he had been around North America. And he includes in the book Bauman's tale about his partner getting killed by a Bigfoot and Bauman's own seeing of the creature, having fired rounds at it. And you say to yourself, why would Teddy Roosevelt,
exactly,
or why would the guy whose book I was talking about tonight on my own podcast, why would they be telling you a factual account about their life and then suddenly slip in Bigfoot?
Exactly.
It just doesn't make sense, unless it had happened in the same context as the rest of what they're sharing, and it was just something else to share that was relative to this whole account.
Well, it makes you think that in and of itself there would be enough adventure in what he's talking about, like you said, his hunting trips. Like, you don't need, it's not for lack of excitement or adventure that you would need to stick in a cryptid or a Bigfoot in there to spice it up. It's like, especially during the times that that book was written, it's like, okay, it was like, okay, this is really dull, so let's put something in there to make it more interesting. That's
Yeah, yeah. And
let
you
me
know,
ask
my brother and I talk about a lot of subject matter, and there's so many of these accounts. Really, if you dig into them, I think it was Davy Crockett had an encounter with a Bigfoot. He didn't call it a Bigfoot, but the description certainly was a freaking Sasquatch. Well, you and I know what it is. There was no name for it at that point in time that he had. But, you know, this is a guy that fought at the Alamo and whatnot. You know, he was like, he was a no-nonsense man's man. You know, probably if you would have told him he was a liar about the Bigfoot, he would have shot you. You know, so I don't think so. You know, I don't think so. You know, the fellow who I was talking about tonight, the book was called The Long Walk. And it was referred to me by one of my listeners. This guy was in a Russian prisoner of war camp or labor camp in Siberia. Okay. And him and 8 other men escaped. And with nothing but the clothes on their back and a small hatchet and a knife, they went 3,000 miles on foot through Siberia, the Gobi Desert, over the Himalayas, and had a Yeti sighting just as they were finishing getting through the Himalayas, going into northern India. And 4 of the 8 guys died on their way.
I can imagine. That sounds like a very treacherous trip.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's a story of human determination, you know, to be free and to live.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And in that process, 4 of the 8 men died. And 4 of them actually made it. But, you know, they all wanted to make it, obviously.
Right.
And, but these guys had a Yeti sighting. And here you have basically a diary account of this escape and journey and actually how he got imprisoned and everything. And within there is this fantastic Yeti account that I had never heard about in my life. And here it was in this man's book.
And again, you ask yourself, why would he need to insert this into the story? It sounds like just based on the whole experience from, like you said, from the point that he got in prison to maybe how they got out, how they trekked across Siberia. I mean, talk about the most unforgiving terrain. And the Gobi Desert. It's like, okay, why would you need to stick a Bigfoot in here or Yeti? It's like, you don't need that.
You know. And he spoke in the account. Of course, he was older, having written it, than he was when he experienced it. He didn't know in the account what they were seeing. He knew what it wasn't, but he didn't know what they were. And he put in the book, after he penned it, that he later had read some information about the hunt for the abominable snowman. Mm-hmm. And he even commented that the people who were writing the account about the abominable snowman being about 5 feet tall, he must have read that somewhere. And he said that I need to correct them, because what we saw was 7 to 8 feet tall. Okay. So he was giving a correction to whomever's work he had read relative to what an abominable snowman looked like, that it was much taller than what he had read.
Right. In other words, that if you think, well, if he was going along in the same vein of what he had read, he would have reported something similar. And instead, he's pointing out, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. Exactly.
Yeah, but he was trying to give a very accurate account all the way along in the book as to what happened and when it happened. And it's a gut-wrenching story.
God, it sounds
I mean, just horrific hardships and despair and death and starving to death and, you know, thirst in the Gobi Desert. I mean, these guys had nothing. You know what I mean?
And that's what I'm saying. That sighting of the Yeti is like it. You know, you would think this person is not about to make this up and insert this in this story. Where, if you think about it, everything here is so. I mean, I haven't read the book. I've never even. You know, it's got to be so riveting. Like, who needs to put a cryptid into the story with just the facts alone of what he went through? Let me ask you something, Bill. Do you think, especially of all the stories that you heard, is Bigfoot friendly or unfriendly towards humans?
Say it again. It just our connection cut out for a second there.
Do you think that Sasquatch or Bigfoot, are they friendly or unfriendly towards humans?
Well, my and it is that the Sasquatch creature is like a human being, and I'm not saying they're part human or anything. I'm not even remotely suggesting they have anything to do with the human race.
Okay.
What I am suggesting is that they are like a horse or a dog or a human being, in that you probably have some nice ones, you probably have some very aggressive ones, you probably have some vicious ones, you probably have some very docile ones. You probably have some that will, at the drop of a pin, will charge you, and you have another Sasquatch who sees you and runs the other way.
Okay.
So I don't think there's much difference between them and a lot of other critters or human beings.
Okay.
That they, depending on which one you meet, and on any given day, I say, if you see Sasquatch and got away, you've had a good day.
Right.
Because my opinion is, and you know I end my podcast with saying, always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. I say that at the end of every podcast.
Right.
And a lot of people kid with me about it, you know, and they come back to me and they tell me what kind of guns they own, and then they say, always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. But I don't say carry a gun to shoot the thing as a trophy.
Mm-hmm.
I say you're not going to have any defense against this thing if it comes at you.
Right. You're not going to outrun it. And, you know, as far as muscle is concerned, you're fighting it. You're not going to come out a winner on that one either.
Well, listen, I know of people who have put a bullet in a grizzly bear and it kept running at them. So, you know, and most people know that do any kind of hunting. You could shoot an elk with a 30-06 round, and that thing, depending where the bullet hits it, that thing can run a long ways before it hits the ground.
Yes.
And you know, if you pop around into a Sasquatch, I mean, I have an account where some pheasant hunters had a Sasquatch leap up out of a briar patch that their dog was working. And this thing was running through a briar patch that this guy said would put you in an emergency room if you tried to do it.
Okay.
He put 2 rounds of 8-shot in his shotgun at close range, 20, 25 yards, right on this thing, and it didn't even flinch. Now, number 8 shot is not a bullet. It's not a long rifle shot. But at 20, 25 yards, you get whacked with 2 shells out of a shotgun of 8 shot and you don't even flinch? I mean, I don't know what... You know, I had a conversation with somebody some time ago, and we were discussing how could such a thing be? And then the thought developed in my mind one day, well, let's look at something like an elephant. Elephant hunters developed a gun that was called the elephant gun.
Right.
Larger bore, bigger bullet, to penetrate, I guess, the hide of the elephant. So I thought to myself, well, what if there were aspects or areas of a Sasquatch body that were, let's just say, more leathery or thicker?
Yeah.
Where maybe they don't want to get hit with the number 8 shot, but it doesn't tear them open and make them bleed profusely like it would, or kill me like it would.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just a suggestion. I have no way of proving any of this. I'm just talking about what I hear.
Right. Well, maybe the thickness of their fur or something that just it doesn't penetrate the same way that, let's face it, we're skin right there, unless we're wearing some type of body armor. But in and of our bodies are kind of defenseless. Just our bodies. It's not the same thing.
Well, the human body, there's not much. I mean, if you get shot as a human being, all you can hope that is it passes through some meat and goes out and didn't catch any arterial blood flow or an organ or something,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But other than that,
Right. And that's exactly what, but again, you mentioned, short of a body being brought in to be dissected of a Sasquatch, we really don't know what the particulars are as far as their anatomy is concerned. What is it exactly? Are they, how similar or dissimilar are they to human bodies? Exactly, as far as what you're talking about is how they're affected by getting shot or any type of weapon. But yeah, you hear, because you hear I've heard some people that, oh, the Bigfoot, I have telepathic moments with them, but they're friendly. They never want to entertain any idea that they could be aggressive. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just nonsense. To me, that is just utter nonsense.
Yeah. I have a feeling that under certain circumstances, and I tell them, I think they're like other animals, that if they're sick, if they're old, if maybe they haven't eaten, just like other animals, when they need to eat, they'll go and hunt or go to places that they normally would because hunger drives them there. Mm-hmm. Or...
And what animal, Marlene, is not going to avoid an easy meal in a pinch?
Of course. Or if they're defending their young, again...
That's right.
Same thing's going to happen. You're going to get more aggressive behavior for most animals.
And look, how many times do people see a bear with cubs and they don't get attacked?
Yeah.
But then you hear it over and over again that so many attacks occur around a sow with her cubs.
Yes.
So the two statements are equally true. Sometimes there's no attack. Sometimes there is an attack. And that's just the bottom line. That's just the way it is. We're not in their heads. We don't know what's going on. But the best thing is to avoid them. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You see a mother bear with cubs, go the other way.
Let me tell you.
And do not delay.
You hear it all the time about people that are foolish, when they go camping, they leave food stuff out. They basically draw them to their camp. Or they get too close because they're taking a picture and they're thinking, oh, it's the bear. And then until it just goes after you.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. You hear a
now,
lot of stories.
I was listening to a man give an account of a bear attack just last week. As stupid as this sounds, this is what this man does. He's a hunter up in the Pacific Northwest, and he goes big game hunting with a long barrel handgun with a scope on it. I mean, he had like a 44 caliber Smith & Wesson with like a 14-inch scope on top of it, a huge barrel on this gun, and he goes hunting for large animals with this handgun that shoots a big shell. So he's carrying a big, one of these like industrial-sized bear spray containers. It looks like a fire extinguisher. He sees this bear, and it doesn't look like anything's going to happen, and all of a sudden she starts to charge. He said the bear was running 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
35 miles an hour, he's saying this bear was running.
Good luck at outrunning that.
Coming at him, and by the time it got close enough where he could discharge the bear spray, the bear ran right through the spray and mauled him.
Oh.
Then she left him. He realized none of his organs were damaged. He was cut up, bitten, stomped on, and he got up to try to get away. 15 minutes into his walk, trying to get back to his vehicle, she comes at him from another direction and hits him again.
Oh, she came after him?
Yeah, and my brother said, you know what the bear was doing, Bill? That bear went to chew her cubs up a tree to make sure they were safe.
Okay.
And then she came back to deal with him a second time.
Wow.
And this guy lived. I mean, you see pictures of him. He was bitten and cut up something bad. Bones sticking out of his arm. Cut up his head. Bites on him. Stitches all over the place. And, but so, why do you think I say always carry more gun than you think you're going to need? A can of bear spray isn't going to cut it.
No, especially how close does that thing have to be? Also,
well,
for you to just...
I guess if you don't hit it just right, this bear came right through the spray.
Yeah, of course.
And I guess all he did was pee it off with the spray where it could still fight and bite, and it still left and was able to come back again having been sprayed.
Now, I'm curious, is he going to continue with these excursions, did he say?
No, he did. The interview ended before he got into any of that.
Oh, okay. I was just like, is he one of these, like, yeah, but even though I've, like, almost, like, saw my life flash before my eyes, I'm still planning to go keep doing this.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
And yet, Marlene, you've seen all the shows, as have I, of these people stomping around the woods with
Yes.
infrared binoculars and looking around, no armament, you know, looking for Bigfoot, you know, and I'm like, man, you guys are out of your minds.
Well, exactly. I see that a lot. And it's like, yeah, and I tell everybody, back in the 80s, me and my husband, we had just had our daughter. This is the kind of stuff you do when you're young and foolish. But anyway, we decided we're going to go to Yellowstone. We do a road trip with our 6-month-old daughter. We're going to go up to Yellowstone. This was when Yellowstone, of course, this was before the fire and everything. And I told him, hey, we're not going to camp out because I hear too many stories about people that with a tent. So we rented a cabin. But anyway, before we go in there, it was June, but they still had snow down. They had just opened a park. And we stopped at this little store, like a little trading post, and we're talking to this lady. And we bring up the subject about bears. And she says, well, you know what, there's not supposed to be bears. And they try to fly them out. They try not to have bears around where the people are. But
yeah,
she says every once in a while, you know, they keep wild animals. So we come in, and my husband had our daughter on his back like a carrier back then. And I remember we're going through the woods, and we're making our way. There's a big lookout tower, you know, and there's a trail that leads to this lookout tower. And we're walking, and all of a sudden I'm walking in front of him, and I see like a reddish fur, kind of, like waving in the wind, kind of like, you know, like when an animal's scratching itself.
Yep.
And I remember I just stopped, and he like bumped in behind me, and I said, look in front of us. There was a grizzly. It was like, holy crap.
Yeah, yep.
You know, the thing about they're not supposed to be around.
Yeah, that's baloney.
There, and within an hour I was getting there. It's right smack in the middle of this park, which is already teeming with people because it opens up. You know, there's a lot of the park that's not open in the winter.
Right.
And we run across for like an hour into there. Then I told them back out. It was huge.
We like to think we're in control of everything, but we are in control of very little.
Oh yeah.
And the notion that you don't have to be afraid, everything's okay, this is just poppycock because, you know, you were given your instincts. You know, look, before human beings had access to weapons, and I'm talking guns, we were as much prey as other animals were prey to predators. Whether they were wolves, giant beasts, bears, tigers, lions, crocodiles, we were prey to animals, and there are areas in the world today, as we all know, where we are still prey.
Yes.
And this guy with this long gun was prey.
Yeah.
So they don't care and they don't understand that they're going to be shot. They're relying strictly on an instinct given to them by the Creator to attack.
Right, for whatever reason.
Under whatever circumstances they deem that to be necessary, they will attack.
Yes, yes. And it's like
So,
they don't care that you're the human and, that we think we're at the top of the food chain or whatever, yeah. And let me ask you something, Bill. Do you think, and I'm going to move, throw something out of left field, all these disappearances that, they talk about now in all these parks or in the wilderness. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a park. Obviously some people, they purposely disappear. I know that. And others are just, they get lost and they fall into some place where they can't get out of. But do you think that there's any connection sometimes between these really weird disappearances and Bigfoot or taking?
There's no doubt about it. To me, there's no doubt about it. And when we talk about people who want to disappear, right? They just want to fall off the map.
Yes.
And then we talk about other people that bite off more than they can chew, going solo somewhere, and they die and they're never found again. But then how about a party of 5 walking down a trail, everybody's whistling Dixie, and then all of a sudden they turn around and say, hey, where's Bill?
Exactly.
And Bill is gone, and a search party ensues, doesn't find any remnants of Bill, clothing, a shoe, his hat, never to be seen again. Now, if you were the victim of a cougar attack, highly doubtful that there would be no sound. But even if there was, and the thing bit you by your throat and nobody heard you, this thing is not going to drag you for miles.
Of course.
So if a search party covers 3 square miles, 4 square miles, 10 square miles, 20 square miles, air and ground, and they don't find you, where the hell did you go? Exactly. Unless something large enough to just grab you, bust your neck, and take you on the shoulder like a grocery bag, and get out of Dodge so fast that nobody has time to even think about it, what else could take you away?
Without anybody hearing anything. Like you said, within
That's right.
Seconds.
And we have...
everybody turns around and where did you go? That you're there just a moment ago.
Yeah, and I have accounts in my books of skeletons that are found, limbs torn off, clothing put on backwards.
Yes.
Like clothing was removed and then put back on. Figure that one out.
Right.
But who the heck puts a shirt back on the person they took it off of and doesn't know that the buttons go down the front?
Exactly.
Or puts boots back on feet. Now, I don't even know what that's all about, but puts boots back on the feet on the wrong foot.
Right. Or they're found in terrain that's been searched before a bunch of times.
And now they're there.
And now they're there.
I mean, just like, what the heck? I don't even know what to say about that. It's all speculation, but it's certainly a mind blower at the very least as to what occurred with that individual. I mean, there's no, what? They did what? They found what? And you just shake your head.
Exactly that. It's very... And again, when you rule out, all the different reasons or variables and you extrapolate, there's still too many and under unusual circumstances for them to fall into the either voluntarily losing themselves or just lost. Or like you said, you're with a group of people. This is now, if that was your idea, why would you wait to be with a group of people before you disappeared?
That's correct. Now, also, Marlene, you haven't asked me, but I'm going to throw this at you. Mm-hmm. A lot of people ask me, is there a paranormal or otherworldly aspect to the Bigfoot? Okay. And my opinion is yes. Okay. And what I believe is there are two things going on here. We have a true-to-life Bigfoot creature, flesh and blood. Okay. Then I believe there is a mimicking going on, and when we get to the story I have for you tonight, okay, I have deliberately picked one that is so freaking far out, you're not going to believe it. Right. But I've heard tale of swirling mists, portals being opened, UFOs hovering over Bigfoot and drawing them up. Yes. High strangeness to the umpteenth degree that just does not register with a human being. And yet these are the stories that are told. Right. So what if I believe there's a demonic aspect to some Bigfoot sightings. And then I believe there is, and when I say demonic, I believe the creature is being mimicked.
Could be, sure.
In a way that it comes and goes, in ways that we're not familiar with. Right. You'll see infrared pictures. Did you happen to catch the series of shows, Expedition Bigfoot?
I probably have, to be honest with you. I've seen so many of them that sometimes I lose track of. I'm almost 100% sure if I didn't catch on, I probably did see it.
Okay, that was a series.
Who were the people involved? That's normally how I remember them. Who were the people that?
Yeah, it was a series that was on this past year. They did about I don't know. I want to say 6 or 7
shows.
One
where they had this lady, a scientist. She was blonde, and she had done work with
gorillas.
With gorillas, yes, I saw that one. Yes, I saw.
Yes. Okay. So during that series of shows, twice they caught what they believe was a Bigfoot or something on infrared. Okay. And in both circumstances, the creature was lit up red hot, as opposed to everything around it. And then it looked like it passed behind a vertical straight line, almost like a concrete wall, and disappeared. So it didn't run away where you were gradually seeing it flashing in and out behind the leaves, or it simply was, and then walked through this line and was gone.
Wow.
Now, look, if you or I film each other with infrared going through the woods behind my house, I'm going to see you passing in and out. Mm-hmm. In one way, shape, or form, I'm going to pick up a little bit of your body heat here or there. You're not just going to vanish in the trees.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, when you get deep enough into the woods, you'll disappear, but it's not going to happen instantaneously.
Right, like if you're going through a doorway and all of a sudden you...
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Passing behind the veil, I call it.
Right, and I have heard of that, where there's an uptick sometimes in UFO sightings that coincide with an uptick of cryptid or Sasquatch sightings. People that start comparing notes.
And it's very creepy.
I think, and like you said, are we talking the same creature? Are we talking a mimic? Are we talking, or is it that there's a rip and maybe these things come through those rips?
Well, look, Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yes, of course.
So many years ago, George Knapp had been covering Skinwalker, and I heard him. He was the first man I was listening to who turned me on to Skinwalker Ranch. Mm-hmm. And if you've heard any of that, there was a time when they had all of these cameras set up around the ranch. Right. They still do, by the way.
Right.
And at one point in time, on one of the cameras showed up what appeared to be a tube. A tube or a hole off the ground in which they saw some type of creature climbing through it. And the creature emerged out of this ethereal tube, jumped out, and ran away.
No, some of the things they've described, even the family that lived there, it's like, wow.
Yeah, now there is no doubt. And let me tell you something, and this can relate to Bigfoot as well. There are things of which we have no knowledge. Okay. There are things out there that we will never know. No matter how much we study it, all we are left to do is look at it in awe and say, what the heck was that?
Yes.
It just, I don't care who the scientist is, how smart they think they are. Your brain doesn't have what it takes to tell me or anybody else what just happened. It's just not there for us. It's not for us to know.
Did you see the special that they just released with the current owner of the Skinwalker Ranch? And
yeah, the new... Yeah, mm-hmm.
That, because for a while they shut everybody out. That they weren't allowing anybody near their place, and they had really heavy security. And supposedly the idea was that they wanted to let things settle down, just if they could have more phenomena come back in. And I recently saw that one, and this guy was bringing in physicists, scientists, and everybody back then was already having experiences of some type or witnessing things that they couldn't explain.
Yeah. It was virtually immediate that things started to happen to them.
Yeah, yes. And I myself, I looked up, the high school teacher that back in the 50s, he was having UFO sightings over the ranch.
Uh-huh.
I did look up, and I found those articles where it did come out. I want to say in the 50s and 60s. I can't remember his last name. It begins with an H, I think. And it was a local paper, and he was talking about how that they had seen UFOs over the ranch. This was way, of course, decades before any of the notoriety of the Skinwalker Ranch. He was just noting it as a science teacher. He was a high school teacher. And I did find those articles. So apparently it's been a long time that area, for some reason, there's something there.
Well, yeah, and before the age where everything is instantaneous, and now, by the way, people don't believe it because of the instantaneous nature of the news.
Yes.
But back then, it gets back to what we were talking about of having a cup of tea on the porch and kicking it around. If somebody was a friend of yours and they were telling you something and you knew them to be a straightforward, honest person, in the days when that actually meant something to people.
Yes.
If they told you a story, you were like, wow. You didn't say you're an idiot and then pick up the telephone or send an email to somebody. You can't believe what Marlene just told me.
Right, exactly. Yes, exactly.
The story I was talking about on tonight's podcast, this long walk, this happened in 1941.
There you go.
There are Bigfoot accounts that we kick around that are over 100 years old.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some of them came out of little town rag newspapers.
Yes,
and they were supported by towns around them. 3 or 4 other little rag newspapers.
Right, and the idea back then wasn't what it is now. It's, sensationalism that you think, okay. Back then, they were reporting it, and sometimes it didn't even make the papers outside of the area, especially if it originated in some small town. And unless you happen to come across this article by sheer chance, going through archives,
Right.
You'd be surprised what you do come across as far as some of the things that people describe that happened to them.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And back then, men would put a posse together in a small town, mm-hmm. and if Marlene said that she was attacked by something, she didn't know what it was, but described a Bigfoot, those good old boys would get together with the pickup trucks and the shotguns and go find that sucker.
Sure, of course. And nobody'd be like, oh, you're crazy. It's be like, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was this belief that something like that could exist or did exist.
Well, let's put it this way. There wasn't a cocky arrogance that it couldn't be.
Exactly.
Because if you or I were known to be an upstanding, credible Christian woman or man, mm-hmm. and we had no reason to doubt what you were saying, then we need to look for this thing before it kills somebody.
Right. Exactly.
And that was the mindset,
Yes.
In the same way as if a rogue bear was reported around the town.
Sure.
We got to find it, because that thing will maul somebody or kill somebody.
Yes, right. And people don't realize that back then, people cared about, especially in communities, like you said, everybody cared. It wasn't just all about like what happens to me. Everybody cared about what happens to us, as mm-hmm. in, somebody else could get hurt, and like. It was a different type of responsibility people had towards each other, of course, depending, what area we're talking about. But absolutely, right. And like you said, and there was this belief, unless you were the town drunk, and it's like, yeah, okay, go sleep it off. People believed you. People actually believed you.
Unless you gave them a reason not to believe you, for right now, what you say is true.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the way it was looked at, and that's the way things were weighed out. Now, if you were found to be a liar, okay, that just changed everything, and everybody would know that as well.
For years.
Yeah. It wouldn't be something you'd drop. You'd have to leave the town or go somewhere else.
Exactly. Now, let me ask something,
mm-hmm.
Bill. What about that story that you? I want to hear that story that you said. Well. That there was a paranormal aspect to it, which, by the way, and I don't want to paint the Sasquatch in a negative light, but right. I do find what the theory that you talked about, that there is more than one aspect of just something that's part of nature, that there might be another angle to it, or what is seen.
Well, let me say something, Marlene, and you can take this or leave it. I believe this wholeheartedly. It's just part of my faith as a practicing Catholic Christian for a long, long time. And I mean, I'm into it tooth and nail. I mean, I can argue the point with anybody. But the scripture says clearly that we should be careful when we entertain strangers. Mm-hmm. Because we don't know if and when we are actually entertaining an angel.
Yes.
So angels can take physical form.
Yes.
They can also be invisible to the eye and yet exert force around you. Mm-hmm. Vis-a-vis the person about to step in front of a bus that doesn't see it, and a hand grabs him by the jacket and yanks him back and drops him on the sidewalk.
Right.
What was that?
Yes.
And the person's now laying on the sidewalk as the bus screams by, blasting the horn, saying to themselves, nobody's going to believe me. Exactly. Something just grabbed me by the nape of my neck, yanked my 200-pound carcass out from in front of that bus, and I'm alive to tell about it.
Yes.
So this is the thing, the stories of the hitchhiker picked up that gives a warning. They look a little odd, somebody recalls that, he's a little strange, this guy. Next thing they know, they're talking, they turn their head at 50 miles an hour, and the guy's not in the seat anymore.
Right.
You know, we know the biblical stories back in Genesis, where Abraham was in his tent and the three men came across the desert. They sat down and ate with him. And then they told him, we're going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And that whole thing. So not only did they have form, they could walk around, they could eat, they could get in your car, you know, so why not?
Yes. And I think that there's like an in-between place. That in-between place has things of tremendous evil and tremendous good. Okay?
There's no doubt.
Outside of our dimension that we exist in, it's like and for people, even people that do the remote viewing, they'll call it the middle plane. Okay, and what exists there in that middle plane is you can come across both things. All right, interdimensional, intradimensional beings. Some of them good, or some of them evil. Evil sometimes meaning they have no moral compass as we understand it. All right.
And they're willing to destroy. They're willing to hurt.
Yes.
They're willing to put fear on you.
Oh, absolutely. Corruption.
And many times they just outright look evil.
Yes.
As we know evil. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now, today, of course, we have the capability in the movies to show things that really are horrific. But I believe that in the demonic realm, many of the things we look at that are evil probably can't cut it with actually how bad they are.
Right.
So I think people have an idea within themselves of what something really horrific looks like. And then they put it to film. But I think that, like with my new books, The Exorcist, they're fictional accounts based on the reality of what actually happens to people. Now, whether people believe that or not is not for me to prove to you. But, for instance, the Catholic Church, since its inception, has been called upon to do exorcisms of those deemed demonically possessed.
Right.
And the Church also has a rite of exorcism. They are prescribed prayers, voluminous in nature, that are said in certain ways, sprinkling of the holy water, lighting of candles, to coerce the demons to come out of an individual. If you go back all the way into the New Testament, there were the story of the 7 sons of Siva. They saw the apostles casting demons out of people. And when they saw it, they were impressed. So they went to cast a demon out of somebody. And the demon came out of the man, and he said, Paul I know, and Peter I know, but who are you?
Right.
So these guys didn't have the authority to deal with the demon, and the demon jumped them. And the account says that they left naked and beaten. Seven men.
Right.
Naked and beaten by one demon.
Well, you know that Father Amarath, who passed away in 2016, which was the main exorcist for the Vatican.
Yes.
You know that they were. I read an article that they were looking at, some of these newly minted priests coming out of seminary, and they were very eager to do, go off and do, except become exorcists. They were trying to tap some of them to,
right.
In other words, become full-time exorcist like Father Amarath. And they were like, no. And I think people don't realize that something along those lines, there's also a psychological pressure that you're under, besides a spiritual one. All right.
Well, it's spiritual warfare.
Yes.
Spiritual warfare in high places. And, the apostles came to Jesus and they said, we went to do what you do. And they wouldn't listen to us. And Jesus said to them, these things only come out by prayer and fasting. So he was giving him some preliminary instructions that what you see me do isn't necessarily what you're going to do unless you are willing to do the things that I do to be able to do them.
Exactly.
In other words, no amateurs allowed.
Yes.
You have to be stronger than what you are fighting to prevail.
Absolutely.
Spiritual fighting is no different than earthly fighting. If you are to prevail and win and champion over the demonic, you have to be prepared spiritually and psychologically to overcome them in their own field of battle.
Yes.
It's like a freaking gruesome gladiator fight without swords. You need to really know, because otherwise they're going to jump on you.
Oh yeah, and I think we all as human beings have this. I don't want to call it an instinct or knowing within us when we're in the presence of something like this.
Well, the presence of evil. We are inundated today with distractions.
Yes.
But I had studied Oriental medicine. I'm a therapist, and now I'm a technician in the hospital. And I would say to people many times through my life, the next time you're sitting at a traffic light and you realize you're turning your head to look at the person next to you. We've all had this happen to us. Mm-hmm. You simply flip your head, like, why did I just flip my head? You don't even think about it. Right. But only to realize that the person next to you is looking at you. Mm-hmm. Their energy has pierced your energy and brought about a response, which is you turning.
Yes.
That is just a minuscule example of sensitivity. Today, people are so inundated with noise, electronic devices, distractions, in particular an area like mine, that they are so far removed from that, they can't even entertain, when you talk about it, the fact that something like that actually exists. They'll roll their eyes. Like, come on, man, I'm busy. I got to get back on Hulu.
Yeah. I hate to say it.
My Netflix is waiting for me.
Multitasking, sorry,
Yeah. How about sitting still and staring into the night sky for a couple of hours?
That's a tall order for a lot of people.
That's right.
A real tall
That's right.
order.
How about sitting down and shutting up for a while and watching and waiting for the hummingbirds to get some nectar? Can you do that? But a lot of people can't.
They can't. They cannot. They might even say they can until they try to do that, but they can't. The sitting still part is almost beyond them. They start to fidget, and it's a sad thing where people we're so caught up that you almost feel guilty when you're not trying to figure out what you're going to be doing 5 minutes, 5 hours, tomorrow, 5 days. It's like, okay. And then people wonder why they're so stressed out.
Yeah, no. But, I mean, look, I just bought a night fishing permit because the fishing grounds that I like to go to is like a parking lot now because of COVID.
Oh, I bet people are just...
I usually go during the week when nobody's around in my little boat. I have places I like to drift for striped bass. The past couple of times I went out there, and the last time I said to my partner, I'm not coming back until this COVID is over. Because people have nothing to do, and everybody and their brother is out on their boat because they're not working. And even during the weekday, it's like a busy weekend.
Yes.
So I bought a night fishing permit. And the night fishing permit is for the Atlantic shoreline over by me.
Okay.
And I can go there after the beach is closed to the public I can park in the handicap spots because nobody's around.
Uh-huh.
And I go down by the beach with the swishing and swashing of the ocean's waves under the blanket of the night sky and the stars. And I could just get lost.
Yes. And that
feel the wind. Feel the wind, pay attention to the tug of my line, and just go away.
Let me tell you something. People don't realize I'm a fisherman myself, or fisherwoman, or whatever you're going to call it. But you know that
Sure.
commercial, milk does a body good? What you described does a soul and your mind good as well. And I've been fishing, and let me tell you something. As far as, because down here I'm very close to the Florida Keys, I do a lot of saltwater fishing.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you something. When you're out there, you just forget about everything.
Yeah, and you're taking everything else in.
Yeah. Yes.
You notice bait fish in the water. Mm-hmm. You notice little ripples. You know where little eddies are. Yeah. You're taking in the birds jumping around or flying over you.
Yes.
You're reconnecting with life, with the planet.
Yes.
And it's something that if you spend every day in the hospital and come home to turn the TV on and go up to Costco and head down to the pizzeria, I do that a lot. Yeah. But I can't be doing that all the time.
Of course. You need, you need that. Let me tell you something, that disconnect time. People, let me tell you something, it's better, and that's the thing. Sometimes people think I have to go to some far off place like Bali, so I have this, moment of introspection. It's like, not really, you could probably do it, because going to the park or doing what you described is just a question of that aloneness, that thing where you live the now, the moment. That's it. That's
well, if you think for a minute, Marlene, about get to Bali, mm-hmm. the rat race of the packing, the ticketing, the airport, the planes, that's hardly worth the event.
Right. It's like, you need a recovery too when you come back from vacation.
Yeah, and if you're like me, I don't even like to fly, so I'd be in the plane chewing my nails,
Yes, it does, and I know that. Yeah, we've kind of get sold on the you need to get away, and it's like, not really. Sometimes that can be stressful in and of itself.
No, that's crazy. But listen, let me read this to you and your listeners.
Okay.
Now, this is actually the first account in Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, Volume 8, which was the last book I published, and that's up on Amazon.
Okay.
And I entitled this account The Coven, okay. Coven, as in witches. Mm-hmm. And you're going to understand why relatively quickly as I read this to you. And believe it or not, this account is written from here on Long Island in New York. Now, for those of your listeners who have no idea about where I live, Long Island's probably, 50, 60 miles long. The furthermost end is Montauk Point. And then, of course, we have Suffolk County, Nassau County, and then we get into the boroughs, which basically lead you into Manhattan. Okay. So we have a fair amount of real estate here where there's not a lot going on, but nothing like, when somebody like up in Idaho talks about going out into the woods. I was interviewing a guy a couple of weeks ago who has 5,000 acres of property.
Wow, that's a lot.
I live on 1.1 acres, and around here, my property would be considered tremendous. There are places on Long Island where you could spit across the driveway into your neighbor's kitchen window. So, now, I have to tell you that strange happenings, and in this case, the demonic, know no boundaries.
Demons don't care where you are, where you live, if you're alone, in a family, in a house, at work. If you start to entertain the dark side of things, they will be more than willing to help you out, if you catch my drift. Mm-hmm. So this following account was told to me by Ernie McDonald, a resident of Brooklyn, New York. And the story, as bizarre as it is, lends credence, if you will, to my long-standing personal feelings that many Bigfoot sightings are in fact hinged on the demonic. And if you believe this story as I read it to you, then everything which I presupposed, even in this conversation tonight, is in fact true. Okay. So this is Ernie. In the late 70s and early 80s, I was going through my teenage growing pains and living in my parents' home, which was in Nassau County, Long Island. Now that I've retired as a city cop, a New York City cop he retired as, and live in Brooklyn, the memories of those days in Nassau County and time still linger, as they do with everybody. For your readers' benefits, Bill, and no one else's, there was a period of time when satanic rituals and animal sacrifices were in the news locally in Nassau County. Now, I know this to be true because I was living and breathing here when this was going on. There were reports of murders, blood sacrifices, altars being found in some areas of woods in some of the parks, satanic symbols, all of this nonsense. If my memory serves me correctly, there was even a case where a couple of teens were busted for allegedly killing a young man in some type of satanic-related way. This incident, along with similar stories of sacrifices, were making the headlines while I was in junior high school. I had first made the acquaintance of a couple of the people of whom I'm about to speak in the 8th grade. We were all in the same grade, but they were a strange group of characters. They were wearing clothes which nobody else wore, and were well known as being druggies. Befriending these people was a bad move for me. I was already considering some experimentation in drugs on my own, and I knew they were a source for what I was going to need. And so it was that over a period of time, with, of course, Satan luring me in little by little, he's looking back now, realizing what happened, that I found myself not only buying drugs from these suppliers, but occasionally hanging out with them. It was during the course of my seeing this group on a more frequent basis, it became known to me that I was an uninvited guest on a number of nights that I was looking to hang out with them. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why, and this had been going on for a number of months when finally I pinned them down while making a buy one day, asking them what the deal was with always being bumped on the weekends from hanging out with them. It was then that this guy, Jeff, looked over to his chum, Freddie, and said, "So what do you think, Fred? Should we invite him?" Well, Fred gave the nod, and they told me to meet them on Saturday night at a specific location. They gave me instructions where to park and said that I should walk over to a certain area of woods alone. They told me to wait there and that they would find me. I remember it being a fairly crummy night weather-wise. I had just gotten my license and wasn't supposed to be out driving after a certain time of day, but I didn't care. I drove to the woods, got out of my car, and walked to where I was told to. After I stood there for about 15 minutes, Freddie came walking out of the woods wearing a strange-looking black robe and told me to follow him. Just turn the page here. I was already wondering what the heck I was getting into, but in the interest of appearing cool, I followed him into the woods. We went deep into a thickly forested area to a point where I could see a fire burning and a number of other people standing in a circle, all wearing the same getup that Freddie was wearing. As I entered into the small clearing, everyone kept their heads down. They were all wearing hoods in a way that concealed their faces, and I couldn't tell if they were boys or girls, and nobody greeted me. Freddie told me to stand at a certain spot. He addressed the group that the initiate, being me, had been brought to the circle. There was a fire going in the middle and a small pile of rocks with a cinder block set to one side. They started to mumble some type of mumbo-jumbo, which I don't recall, which led up to one of them removing a cat from a bag and killing it on the cinder block with a knife. There was this whole kind of sacrificial thing going on, which I didn't quite get at the time. At the end of it, they asked me directly if I wanted to be a member of their coven. To which I said yes. Now, I know it sounds nuts, but that's how it all began. It involved drugs and weirdness, as well as my dealers, and so I was all in. Over a period of many months, I came to realize that these kids were steeped in evil practices, calling themselves witches and Satanists. What started out to be something cool was getting more than a little bit overboard for me. It was during October of that year, with Halloween fast approaching, that plans were being made for this big sacrificial meeting, which was going to occur at midnight on Halloween, and all were required to attend, including me. I had been going to these meetings on at least 6 occasions, if not more, and had been being exposed to more and more of their practices and literature, which I began to realize was nothing that I had bargained for. The night had arrived, and we all met up in the usual way in the same area of woods. In similar fashion, by the time I had arrived, being told yet again what time to show up, all of the other participants were already there, which to me spoke of the fact that I still was not completely a part of the group as of yet. To be honest with you, the only reason I hadn't bailed out was the fact that this dude was my sole connection for drugs, and I felt as though if I was to stop, I would most definitely be cut off. It was close to midnight as all were once again gathered around the blazing fire when one participant stepped closer to the fire. This person, who I now knew was a woman and considerably older than myself, dropped her hood while everyone else stood with heads bowed in silence. I was peeking out from under my own hood as she began to chant some type of strange incantation, which was followed by her and the rest of the group verbally calling in some type of demon by name. On and on they went, chanting and calling upon this demon to appear, when a faint figure began to materialize within the fire's flames. Louder and louder they chanted as this thing became more apparent with each passing second. Suddenly, the group became deathly silent, as the woman who was leading the ceremony dropped her hands in her head, appearing almost as if she had fallen asleep on her feet. As I stood there, peering out from under my hood, I gazed upon all the others in the group and this demon in the fire. The entire group was standing on their feet as though they were dead. Their chins were touching their chests, and their shoulders and arms were hanging limp. The demon was standing, or should I say floating, within the fire's flames, completely still. It was a horned Bigfoot, a monstrous, hairy beast, which was impervious to the flames which were licking up and around it, and it had horns protruding from the sides of its head, being a miniature version of those seen on a bison. I thought I would crap in my pants right on the spot, and whatever had come over the rest of this group hadn't come over me. Well, I turned and ran like there was no tomorrow, and no one followed. Let's just say I didn't stop or turn to see if anyone had followed, and that was the end of it for me. In the days which followed, I was in fact cut off, and I didn't care, with Jeff telling me that if I said anything, there would be repercussions. Having read your entire collection in the series, Bill, the fact that this demon had appeared in the form of a Bigfoot on that night gave me reason to contact you was a little confirmation of your theory. As I stood there, this thing appeared to be in full bodily form, suspended off the ground within the flames, and yet it was not consumed by them. It didn't move so much as an inch up until the time that I fled the scene. I actually felt that I was in some type of imminent danger had I stuck around any longer. There you have it.
Wow. I'm just going to ask out of curiosity, did this experience, is this what like straightened him out? Like, did he ever say this was the turning point for him?
Well, he became a city cop.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I know at some point he had to get off of it. Was this, because I would think this would be it for me.
Well, you know what it is, Marlene? I think that, and I know this to be true for me in many aspects of my life, we all experience things that are turning points for us in a variety of ways. Is that not true?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately for some people, they don't get the opportunity to turn. They get killed.
Yes.
They die in the process, right?
Yes.
I could use examples, but I don't think it really matters. This guy, there was an old TV show, and I don't think I ever saw an episode of it. You remember it was called Scared Straight?
Yes.
They'd invite people to go into a maximum security prison.
Yeah.
And hang out with the people that were in there, and these people would come out like, I don't want nothing to do with that.
Right. There were. I remember there was like young kids that were like on their way to criminal. They were going to get locked up eventually. So,
right.
This was their last chance before they kind of like became hardcore criminals. In other words. Right,
and they made a show out of it just to impress on the listeners or the viewers and them. If this is the path you're going down, then you might as well see where it is you're going to live.
Yes.
And so this guy, had notions like a lot of people do of getting junked up or, whatever it may be, alcohol, pills, heroin. And he had his connection, and his connection turned out to be a little bit more than just a drug connection,
I mean, he's very lucky that they just warned him, shut up, don't talk about this, and let him off with that. Sometimes they can be quite vengeful.
Well, yeah, we have the MS-13 gangs here on Long Island, which they've been cracking down on.
Right.
And a lot of people have been found in shallow graves at their hands.
Yeah.
And some of them had done nothing wrong, but apparently in their demonic gang, to kill somebody is part of the initiation.
Yes.
So you have to be willing to take a life to be part of them.
Yeah.
So.
And what people don't realize that sometimes people commit murder, and there's a personal reason, the love, hate, like in other words, there's a personal vendetta sometimes, but to actually go and kill someone that you have nothing against, you don't know anything about this person, but you're willing to cold-bloodedly kill them. That takes a real I think that's of all the, when you look at murder overall, you have got to have no moral compass whatsoever inside of you. Like what that I would say falls into what's a true psychopath.
Right. Well, the most precious thing is life, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. To kill somebody for no reason other than as initiation into a gang.
Or pleasure if you think that to be pleasurable.
Right. And for a lot of them, there's I hate to say, people don't realize that some of these psychopaths, they're, especially if they have a violent streak in them or because of their upbringing, they take a life. They murder people a lot of times when they really don't have to.
Right.
They go the extra step, and that's why they fit so well into that kind of gang identity. Or what is it that they say? Rape, kill. I know they have like a motto or something, or rule. I mean, they have like that's horrific. When you listen to it, it's like horrific.
Well, if you look, and I tell people this all the time, because I see it today in my face. Mm-hmm. If I was to say to you, what is the foundational teaching of the Church of Satan? What would you say?
Wow. I would say corruption or destruction, or even though a lot of them play it off as just being hedonistic, do what you want.
You're partially wrong and partially right with what you said. And the last of what you said is where you were right. Here is the fundamental teaching. Mm-hmm. Do what you will,
right,
and let nobody tell you what to do.
Right.
Simple, right?
Yeah.
But in its simplicity, this is the essence of rebellion,
right,
which is how Satan fell from grace. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. And you're not going to tell me what to do.
Right. And there's no
And when I look around today societally, what I see a lot of is this. Now most of these people that I'm speaking of, mm-hmm, in their mind and heart, they have no association with Satan whatsoever.
Right.
They're not saying I'm a Satanist. They're not standing around a fire with black hoods sacrificing a cat.
Right. That traditional, what people think of as, exactly.
Right, but in and of themselves, being in this light of not doing anything, and you're not going to tell me what to do, mm-hmm, and I have my own rule book by which I live life. Yes. No moral compass, no rules, no absolutes. They are, in fact, doing exactly that.
Right. There is. There's no. In other words, there's no consideration for anybody else. If that person is in the way of you doing what you want,
that's right,
then you don't think twice about getting rid of them or doing whatever you need to do, as long as you get to do what you want.
I grew up in the 60s. And my remembrance of the 60s, and I saw everything going down from day one. Free love, make love, not war, sex, drugs, rock and roll. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. And even back then, as involved I was in such things at the time that I'd rather not admit to, and I'm glad I got away from them, I saw things turning in a way that I said, this is not going to end well. And so I stepped away. And many of my associates didn't. And I don't even know these people anymore. It's funny how you think when you're younger, mm-hmm, that all the people you're hanging around with, you're going to see throughout your life.
Yeah, boy.
And then you get down the road a decade or two or three, and you're like, I don't even know these people anymore. I don't even know where they are.
Yes.
And so I look back and say, those times were better than these times. But, the good old days are relative to who you are and how old you are.
Oh, well, of course. And I think all of us kind of do that, what is it, that patina that we put on things of the good old days. And we kind of overlook sometimes some of the, we look at only the good part and we forget sometimes the bad part. Or we kind of minimize the bad parts a little bit. But yeah, I want to say that I think something that definitely we lack today, whether you want to blame it on technology or whatever it is, that life was slower. It was slower, and I think it was better in that aspect. As far as
and relationships were truer, I think.
Yeah.
Responsibility to each other was greater.
Yes. People. And friendships were longer, and people knew each other for a long time. And I want to say even people stayed longer living where they lived at. There were, where people would live in their houses very easily, 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
And you kind of it's like that community, and then even the people that you knew. Yeah, you would have friends come and go, but there was consistency to relationships.
Right, and it's really in that light that even when I interview many of the people I do over Bigfoot encounters, these people are living different lives than I am where they live, and I know that when I speak to them. You know, when a guy tells me, well, Bill, I'm living on 5,000 acres, there's no way that you could be living in an area where you can purchase and live on 5,000 acres that I'm even going to assume for 10 seconds that your life there is anything like my life here.
Yes.
Just by making that opening statement that I have a house on 5,000 acres tells me I'm talking to an individual, aside from being a fellow human being, that has a way different look at life than I do. And so if this person starts telling me that the nearest town is 12 miles away from me, and my neighbor is, 3 miles east, my nearest neighbor.
That was what I was about to say. His closest neighbor is how far away?
Yeah, and so when they're talking to you about what they do in the woods and what they know about the animal population, and then about the howling that occurred and their sighting of the Bigfoot, it takes on an entire different meaning to me. This individual knows what it's like to get up to quiet in the morning, and to get lost. And I say this all the time. Predominantly, people that have encounters are people that are out doing things that you and I generally don't do, which is getting lost in places where there aren't too many people.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean like other people don't have a sighting of a Bigfoot running across a highway upstate New York or in New Hampshire or something, or walking on the shoulder of the road in Ohio. These things happen, but predominantly the people that are coming across unusual things in light of seeing a Bigfoot are seeing them because they're out there in the quiet, stealthily walking around. They're in areas that they know. Some of them know these areas pretty well. And then one day, boom, it happens.
Well, and it makes you think that, especially when you live, after a while, you hear or you become familiar with the sounds of normally of the animals that populate, let's say, that piece of land, let's say, very close to your home. After a while, you learn whether it's coyotes or wolves or whatever is out there. So
they know it. They know what it is.
Weird call. You instantly know what. Yeah. In other words, it's not like you're mistaking there was a coyote or a wolf. No, because I know what a coyote or a wolf or if you've got a cougars or whatever's out there, I already know what that sounds like, and I know it's not that.
That's right. And in the same light, when they see a track,
exactly,
they know it's not a big bear. They know it's not this. They know it's not that because they know what these tracks look like. Yes. And so there are very credible witnesses out there that to me are indisputable. Now, anybody and their brother can dispute them, but to me, they are like, wow, that was incredible, and I believe you.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't have to challenge everybody. Everybody's not full of beans. Everybody is not CG in the photograph.
Yeah.
It's funny because people were saying, well, where are the pictures? Where are this and that? Well, now we're getting some more pictures, which my brother and I talk about all the time, how we believed it would happen with all the telephones and the trail cameras and all this stuff. There are more pictures surfacing. And at the same time, with the real ones, there are other people CG in them and trying to get YouTube hits.
Of course.
They're just trying to muddy the water, and some is true and some is false, and now everybody's like, well, how do we know? Well, we don't know.
Well,
we don't know.
And you know what, Bill, because I've been a paranormal investigator since the 1990s, and I tell everybody, that just like even where there's Bigfoot, there's people out there that on purpose are trying to have an encounter. But then you have the other people, just like in paranormal investigations or paranormal phenomena. They're not necessarily looking to have an encounter, but it happens. And they don't have a camera, or their phone is not out.
Right.
You know, in other words, the only thing they have is their word.
That's right.
To say, to describe what happened, because in truth, they weren't looking to have the experience. Right. Sometimes I find those more credible in a way because it just happened to them. They just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and they didn't have anything except like it happened. It happened, and I stood there, and especially if you're scared out of your wits, or you don't even have the wherewithal sometimes to reach in and get a phone and, you know, put on your video to record it. You're just like, huh? Especially if it's something that happens within a few seconds.
Yeah, and you know, the average person, I would say, wonders, well, why didn't you take a picture? But having not had the experience, they don't know what's involved in that. You're stunned. Yes. You're like in a state of a catatonic state where you're just like, you're trying to weigh out what's going on, and then it's over. And you're left standing there like, you know, what just happened? Right. Exactly. You know, I know what just happened, but you're asking yourself what just happened. Like it's out of the realm of reality. Right, because what most people are doing in that moment is their brain is trying. They go through all these logical. They want to explain it. They want to make it fit the reality they know. Right, it's like a subconscious checklist that you're going through. Exactly, and then you come up like, and then of course the moment comes and goes. It's like what happens maybe when people have sightings of anything, and it's like. And again, this is when we come back to what we were originally talking about. People that sometimes keep these stories for themselves for years and years, and they never tell anybody about it because they themselves would think, if I heard this story coming from somebody else, I'd be like, sure. Yeah, it's just incredible. But anyway, Bill, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me and my audience tonight. It has been absolutely wonderful. It's fascinating. And again, for my podcast listeners, if you want to give out your website address where they could find you more information about your podcast and your books, what is your website address? Well, the website is BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com. And you can contact us there and look up old episodes if you want. And then the podcast is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, available like everywhere. And, of course, you'll see my name, W.J. Sheehan. Okay. And then all of the paperbacks and ebooks are on Amazon. Again, the same name, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. W.J. Sheehan, volumes 1 through 8 are on... at Amazon. Mm-hmm. And then at Audible, I have 6 of the Bigfoot books, 1 through 6, recorded in audiobook. I'm still hoping that the studio will open up again and I'll get to record some more. Okay. And then I have the 3 new Exorcist books, and they're called The Exorcist, Truth and Lies, The Exorcist Diabolica, and The Exorcist Full Moon, all by W.J. Sheehan. And they're available also at Amazon in paperback. And one of them, Diabolica, is actually recorded on Audible. On Audible. Perfect. And I will have a link to in the credit to the show as far as the website. Again, Bill, it has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for spending this time. You are... your stories are fascinating. They're riveting, as a matter of fact. Well, I appreciate it, Maureen, and we're one big circular family today in this world of podcasting and interviewing, and audiences overlap. And I had a guy today that sent me an email, and he heard about me on a small podcast I did probably a month ago with this woman named Emily called The Forest Floor. Okay. Very nice woman. She actually lives here in Long Island, which I was shocked. And he said, "Hey, Bill, I heard about you on Forest Floor, and I'm following your podcast now. Great, love to hear all this, blah, blah, blah." But so it's all circular. You don't,
Right.
The audiences are just people of the world, and
Of course.
they're all flowing from here to there and, back and forth like the waves on the ocean.
But you know what, Bill? Ultimately, all human beings, I think from the beginning of time, what we all enjoy is a good story. Everybody, I think, that's something, I think from childhood on, we want to hear. And then I'm not talking whether it's fiction or nonfiction, the story, the retelling of something.
Well, when my brother got involved with me, Marlene, I had to tell him. I said, Kev, there are stories that people want to hear again and again. Just like the Christmas Carol.
Yes.
Or the Night Before Christmas. I'm just using Christmas because those are stories we all remember. But there are Bigfoot stories that I said to him, I'm going to tell these stories periodically, even though I have hundreds of accounts to share. You never know when somebody's the first person in your audience.
Yes.
They've never heard anything. They don't even know what Bigfoot is.
Exactly. Despite what other people think, who doesn't know about Bigfoot?
Absolutely. When I look at my audience on the podcast, I get feedback, global feedback, as to how many people download in what countries.
Right.
And first of all, the length and breadth of the amount of countries where people are downloading is ridiculous.
Yes.
And I say to myself, let's just say I see downloads in Taiwan. What the heck do people in Taiwan know about Bigfoot?
But you know what? It's the story. It's the story. Exactly.
So people love the story. They love the scare, if there is a scare. And if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. I was being interviewed one night on Coast to Coast Radio, and George Norrie says to me, "So William, where's the terror? Where's the terror in Terror in the Woods?" And I say to people all the time, terror? If you're standing in front of a 8 or 9 foot tall monster that weighs 1,000 pounds, that doesn't frighten you?
Yeah.
That's not terrifying? If that's not terrifying, I can't help you.
No, exactly. And you know what, people, I want to say this real quick, Bill. You remember when I said that trip that I went out to Yellowstone back in the 80s?
Right.
This was the first time I was exposed to buffalo and bison. These things are huge. You
They're
huge. You see them on the television, and all these nature shows. And until you're physically there, the scope, how big some of these animals are.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. You hear these stories about Bigfoot, or you see the TV show. But if there was a way that you could actually be in the presence, the reality, not television, of seeing something that measures 8, 9, 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
Looking at you in the woods, oh, come on. Let's be.
Yeah, come on. If you've ever stood near a Clydesdale horse.
They're huge.
It's just like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You've just got to be kidding me. It's immense.
Yes.
And I'm with you on that. Marlene, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to suit up now and go pick up my wife at the hospital.
Okay. All right. But again, thank you so much, Bill.
My pleasure. If you ever want to do it again, just knock on my door.
You got it. Thank you, darling. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye now.
Wow. I could talk to him a lot more. There was a lot because we talked before we started to record about, different areas. I wanted to go into those books, the Exorcist books, but it was like, okay, I'm going to leave that for part 2 when I bring him back. Because that's a whole different show, in other words. Even though it kind of overlaps, and it's true, there's so many theories about Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You have the people that think that they're strictly, whether you want to call them animals, humans, or something in between, a species or some type of primate, whatever. but that they look at them strictly as natural. There's nothing. Then, I've also heard the theories, by the way, of really good sources that have told me, look, we've noticed when people track them, that around the same time that we see a spike in people seeing Bigfoot or cryptids, other cryptids, we also see a rise in numbers of UFO sightings. And these people will say, I don't know if the two are together or why one and the other, why they dovetail. In other words, they don't understand that they've just found that when you track that type of information, after a while, you say, wow, every time people report these sightings, and by the way, sometimes these communities don't overlap. You have people that are strictly in the Bigfoot camp, and there's people that are strictly ufologists, and there's no connection. They're working in their own fields, or they're reporting encounters or sightings totally independent one of the other. And then there's somebody in between that either has a blog or for some reason is collecting stories of unusual events. And they're the ones that after a while have found, wow, every time that there is significant uptick, and I've said it before. I remember I went one time to a meeting for this group that we had here in Miami. That people, it's a UFO, and afterwards, after the meeting, because we had a presentation, and then everybody, of course, keeps on talking amongst themselves. I had several people come to me and tell me that after they had UFO sightings, they had started having paranormal events take place. From typical, some of them describe encounters with or sightings of UFO, of extraterrestrials. Others, it wasn't so much abduction scenarios or seeing, but they had the equivalent of, how can I say it? I don't want to say ghosts per se, but they would have like strange noises going on, just stuff that you normally equate with the paranormal or the supernatural. But everything started when they sighted a UFO, and they themselves somehow can't make the connection, like, what does the UFO have to do with me all of a sudden having these experiences inside my home that they're scary, because you think of as in paranormal or ghostly or haunted. Like, to them it's like, how do these two things, but I can't overlook the fact that I saw this and now it's manifesting inside my home. And some people, like what they call like traditional, like poltergeist activities, where you don't see it, but you'll have strange knockings, things going on that start up coincidentally after people, or in some cases I've also heard this starting up after people have seen an extraterrestrial by their home, or looking in through a window at them, or actually visiting them. And then after that, they start having these experiences in their houses, where they live at. And again, how can I say it? How people say, okay, well, you experience what you have a preconceived idea of. Most of these people, they're still trying to get their head around actually having seen an extraterrestrial. But they never in their mind would make a connection between, I saw an extraterrestrial and I have poltergeist activity in my house now. It's like those two things are totally separate, but it's still happening for them. So it's not like, oh, I'm having poltergeist activity because I know I expected this to come as part of a UFO or an extraterrestrial encounter. They themselves can't figure out what does one thing have to do with the other, but they can't deny that they have. And by the way, some of them described it was only for X amount of time, maybe a few weeks or months, and others described years where they would have encounters and or activity in their home what would die down and then it would pick up, but it was ongoing for years. So again, circling back to what we were talking about with Bill, as far as is there, and for the people that want to say, is there a connection between Bigfoots, or are they both right? Are there Bigfoot which are totally natural, part of nature, flesh and bone, there's nothing paranormal about them, if that's what you want to call it, and then there are some of them where they're mimicked, or where their origins are from something that's coming in from another dimension. That is, the possibilities are endless. As far as what their origins are they natural? Are they not natural? Can they come and go at their will, maybe through rips into another dimension, or not? And again, sometimes, despite what people think, there's a lot of, let's say in the United States, God, there's so much land out there that something like this or could hide in. All right, despite what we think of that we're everywhere, no, human beings are not everywhere. So it begs the question, and I was very serious when I asked them that about are Bigfoot, are they friendly to us or not? And I liked his explanation, because I'm sorry, despite me wanting to think that they're all going to be friendly towards us, I think the best we're going to get out of them is that they want to maybe stay away from us, but I really don't think they're that friendly towards us all the time. At best, they stay out of our way or observe us, or at worst, then they might be capable of killing a human being. Okay. Whether the killing is motivated by defending territory, defending young, or, God, they want to eat us. I know that some people are going, why not? Do we make up part of their diet? Do they see us the same as any other? Or, again, a lot of predators, if they are sick or hurt or infirm, and they cannot bring down their normal prey, they will take prey that they normally wouldn't, just because, hey, I'd rather do this versus starve. So I could see that happening as well. Where normally they would stay out of they don't want to have anything to do with us. They sometimes are forced to, or let's say these creatures are used to hunting or food gathering in groups, and you get one that by accident or intentionally is kicked out of their group, or is lost, or something happens, and maybe the collective group, whatever you want to call it, that they would use for sustenance, for food gathering, for even gathering prey, is not there anymore. So they're kind of on their own, okay? And whereas maybe we could hunt and kill this type of animal in a group, now by myself, I'm going to be forced to take the human, because I really want meat and I'm starving and I can't keep eating just berries. Sometimes it's as simple as that, necessity, hunger, or not. Sometimes it's strictly by choice, or what most predators do, which is the opportunity arises, and it's there. And you know, for us that we live in an existence where when we want something to eat, we can just step into the other room and get something to eat. When you live in the wilderness, where maybe part of your everyday existence is survival, and part of that survival has to do with your food intake, because think about it. If you're a creature that is, upwards of 7 feet, weighs hundreds of pounds, how much food do you think that you need to sustain a metabolism for a creature that size? A lot of food. I mean, if you ask anybody, zookeepers where they keep predators, the heavier, the bigger, how much money is spent in giving them meat just to sustain them, just maintenance. Same thing applies. There's my dog's having a moment. Think about it. If you're a huge Bigfoot, how much food do you think that you're going to need just to keep yourself going from day to day? Oh my God. You know what? They must be hearing something, guys. Okay, you guys. They've been so good so far. Yeah, maybe that's my sign to let you guys go. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show with Bill Sheehan. Just make sure to check out his website. Like I said, I'll have a link on the credits of the show. Hey, you, be quiet. They got all excited. Little dogs. They don't realize they're little dogs. They're all Doberman pinchers in their imaginations. But anyway. And, of course, I have more of my own books coming out. This last one is supposed to be coming out next month in August, called The Dead Cast No Shadow, which is Sybil novella number 2. Okay, you can find that at MarlenePardo.com or on Amazon as Marlene Pardo Pellicer. I have all my books on there too. Ebooks, both ebooks and printed. And I do have a free version of a young adult anthology. It's only 3 stories. You go to Smashwords and you look for it. It's the title of the book is I've Come For My Girl and 2 Other Dark Tales, or you can look me up on my name. And you'll find there that I have that book for free on Smashwords. If you go to look for it on Amazon, it's going to be 99 cents. But if you go to Smashwords, you can find it there for free. So again, guys, thank you for being part of my audience. You're all wonderful. I hope you're all doing well. And in 2020's really been an interesting year. But in the meantime, I've got a lot of interesting guests coming up, so please make sure to subscribe to the show. Make sure you get your notifications, and I will see you next week. Take care.